All right, this is the Big Douglas Show. It is a Friday. Camp has started, and here to break it all down with me is one of my favorites, Mark Bullock. Mark, how are you today?
I'm doing good. And yourself?
It's football time, buddy. So we're doing good. Camp has started. They've been at it for a couple of days now. There's not a ton of news. I'll tell you what, Mark. The biggest no news is that nobody has gone down yet. This first day or two of camp. Like what Tampa Bay, Ryan Jensen down like on the second play.
You hate to see that first thing.
And in return, we're kind of getting guys back. So feels like we've been through a couple of years where it was us the first day or two losing somebody. So this is a good thing. So I thought maybe we just go ahead and start right at the top of the roster and work our way through. Maybe some guys that are surprises that we think will stick around. Maybe some guys we don't think will stick around, and we just have a good time running through the roster like we always do. Let's start right at the very top with the quarterback. I mean, I think it's easy. Obviously Carson Wentz is his job. He's the best prospect or quarterback we've had since I'd say Cousins, and a lot of the season will be on him. Are you a fan of Wentz and what he should bring to the offense?
I think he can fit with the offense. I don't know if I would go quite so far as saying I'm a fan of Wentz, but he's certainly better than what they've had, as you say, probably since Cousins, and I think you could argue that you'd probably take Wentz over Cousins in certain situations. Like the highest high of Wentz is higher than the highest high of Cousins. So.
Correct.
I think you would take Wentz, and certainly from a pure talent perspective, when he's at his absolute best. I mean, we saw the MVP season way back in 2017. He's a potentially a very good quarterback when he's playing well. So I think you have to be somewhat excited about that, and I think the skill set with the arm strength, and not just the arm strength, but the willingness and the ability to push the ball down the field. I think you have to be excited about that, especially given what this offense last year was really lacking. They couldn't generate many explosive plays, and a lot of that was down to not to disrespect Taylor Heineke, because he did an admirable job, but he has limitations, and he wasn't able to drive the ball down the field effectively last year, and that limited the offense. So I think Wentz's skill set should produce more explosive plays, which will, help the offense in various aspects.
It's interesting. The Eagles, I see Eagles fans all over my timeline crushing Carson Wentz. And we know how at least the management portion of the Colts crushed him on his way out. At his best, he was on his way to an MVP. At his worst, he throws YOLO balls that frustrate you real bad. If we can get somewhere in between with the skill set, the offense could be electric.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like they have a lot more talent and depth at the skill positions now. They've got obviously Terry McLaurin locked up, Jahan Dotson first round pick, and Curtis Samuel hopefully is back healthy this year. That's instantly a very good top three receivers, and De'Ami Brown isn't a bad guy to have as your fourth guy. And then the tight end spot, Logan Thomas coming back healthy. I quite like Cole Turner, especially what he could bring to this offense, and how his skill set kind of meshes with Wentz, with the kind of big target and large catch radius that kind of helps Wentz with some of his weaknesses. So, and then the running backs obviously as well, the depth that they have at running back. So you feel good about the pieces around the quarterback. You feel like there is potential to be an explosive offense, but it's just whether it always is. The team goes as far as the quarterback will take them, and I guess we'll see just how far Wentz can take them.
And we'll get to the positions. Let's wrap up the quarterback position this way. Generally speaking, it feels like keeping two is the right move, but I'm not sure that you can get Hal to the practice squad and keep them all year. Now, we're only 2 days into camp, but like today was a good offensive day by all accounts. and Howell looked good. I'm curious as to what that means for Heineke. I mean, maybe they're hoping a quarterback goes down somewhere and they can move him. But if we think, I mean, would they keep 3?
I think that it's pretty much nailed on. They'll keep 3. I think
you got to, right?
in years, yeah, you like Heineke. Rivera's made a big kind of thing about Heineke is their backup quarterback and Wentz is their starter, and they spent a 5th round pick on Sam Howell because that was just too good value to pass up, and he was obviously going to be a developmental guy. So you're not going to try to get a 5th round quarterback through to the practice squad. You just don't risk that kind of thing. So I think they will roll with 3, and they'll find somewhere else where they can cut down on 1 or 2 spots and allow them to go with 3 quarterbacks.
I think you're right, because I just don't see how. I just don't think you could risk it, particularly since you said you spent a 5th round pick on him. So, and the likelihood that he makes it all year, I think, is slim. So it'd be interesting. So then we'll have to figure out somewhere to find the extra position, the roster spot. We'll move on to running back. It feels again like 3 is the number there, assuming it's Gibson, Brian Robinson, and McKissic. Means Jarrett Patterson, the fan favorite from last year, probably back to the practice squad this year.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think you would balance it, because obviously last year they went with 2 quarterbacks and 4 running backs. I think with Robinson being there, you have obviously McKissic back for the role that he played last year, and Robinson is a little bit more of a workhorse back that could take some of the load off Gibson. So you feel good that if one of McKissic or Gibson went down, Robinson would be able to step up as the workhorse back, and Gibson could potentially play some of the passing stuff that McKissic does, or if Gibson goes down, Robinson can step up and take the workload and let McKissic stay as the 3rd down back. So I think you can cover all bases with those 3, and unless Patterson does some outstanding preseason performance again, and makes it like as a return guy or something like that, then I would imagine it's probably 3 running backs.
J.D. McKissic caught 80 balls 2 years ago, and people forget how much he was used in the offense. Do you think they'll use him similarly this year with Carson Wentz, who typically in the past was more of a deep ball passer or an intermediate passer to the tight ends? That's not necessarily what the offense is, though, that they run. What are your thoughts there, and do you think they'll switch it up?
Yeah, no, the offense is more about attacking down the field, and then that opens things up for the check down guys underneath. And like if you take one of the more basic plays, 4 verticals, you're sending 4 receivers deep. And I think John Gruden famously said that 80% of the time on 4 verticals, you're checking it down to the running back and you're letting him work one-on-one against an underneath linebacker. So I think this offense is very much built like that, where the backs get a lot of balls checked down to them and in a lot of space. And that's why McKissic was able to thrive. And obviously you mix in the way Scott Turner likes to move guys around and put them in different spots, then the backs get quite heavily involved. So I don't think Wentz will have an issue with that. When he first came into the league, he had a guy like Darren Sproles who profiles pretty similarly to the way J.D. McKissic plays. So and Sproles was plenty productive with Wentz. So I don't think it will be a case of Wentz will struggle to kind of transition to working the backs more than maybe the tight ends or what have you. I think he'll be fine. I think the primary thing that Wentz is going to be trying to do more than Heineke is push the ball down the field. And if there's kind of a 50-50 or maybe a 40-60 in the defense's favor, Wentz might give his guy an opportunity. So whereas Heineke in the past years, or like an Alex Smith or whoever before that, probably would have not taken the chance and checked it down to the back. So that raises the McKissic target. So I don't think he'll get 80 balls, but I still think he'll get plenty of workload.
And as far as Robinson goes, if you take I believe I saw 70 carries for Patterson last year in his backup role. and well over 200 carries for Gibson. I mean, there's definitely a spot there for Brian Robinson to get 100 carries this year, which is a good number.
Yeah, I think the way I've kind of been seeing Robinson is I think a lot of people are getting a little bit carried away thinking that Robinson's going to replace Gibson as the lead back, and I don't think that's going to happen. But I think if you can kind of reduce Gibson's snaps by maybe 30%, maybe anywhere in that kind of 30, 35, 40% range, and let him be a little bit more fresh, and maybe you see both Robinson being able to carry a bit more of a workload, and Gibson being maybe a little bit more efficient, because we haven't seen Gibson break off those long runs like we might have expected to. We've seen him hit sort of 15 or 20-yard runs every now and again, but we haven't seen him hit that 40 or 50-yard touchdown run. And I think he's had injury issues, but the fatigue of the workload that he was a receiver in college, so he's not used to carrying the ball 30 times a game, So if you can bring that workload down, you might see his efficiency go up because he's more fresh and he's able to hit the hole a little bit faster and be a little bit more explosive. So I think that's kind of the mix you're looking for is Robinson takes over, as you say, those 70 carries from Patterson and maybe eat into Gibson's workload, maybe about 30%, and keep Gibson a little bit more fresh. It's
a bit of a misnomer, Mark, that about Gibson's number last year for the stats, because they show big numbers, but to your point, very lacking in explosive plays and maybe those high-end numbers that you kind of expected to get from a guy with such explosiveness. And I think, to your point, taking away some of his touches actually should make him more explosive because you have less wear and tear on the body. So I like what they did. I understand. I think the concept of bringing in Robinson, also a guy that I think you bring in because he's a completely different back, right? So he shouldn't scare Gibson as far as like if they had brought in a Gibson clone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then maybe Gibson's like, oh, damn, I'm in trouble. This shouldn't have done that. I think this should have put everybody at ease as far as everybody's role and what they're supposed to do. Let's move now to the tight end, Mark. I think this is the most intriguing of all of the position groups because this has gone from a group that basically had Logan Thomas and John Bates to, I think, a group that's got a lot of potential and a lot of different types in there, even all the way to Curtis Hodges, the undrafted guy who our buddy Logan Paulson says he thinks may be the best of the group in 2 or 3 years. What do you think about this tight end room?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of kind of untapped potential there. I think obviously you know what you're going to get with Logan Thomas, assuming he's healthy. And that's obviously an assumption at this point because we'll see how he comes back from his injury late last year, and hopefully he does. But if you have him, I really quite like what Cole Turner said. I think I mentioned it earlier. I like what Cole Turner could bring to this offense with this system and with his skill set, being a bigger body, and he's almost kind of a big slot receiver rather than a tight end, and he brings a big catch radius, and he's not the most amazing route runner, but he's a decent route runner, and he can improve in that aspect, and he can provide some kind of mismatches. And yeah, John Bates came along nicely at the end of last year. I think he was maybe a little bit overhyped in terms of how good of a run blocker he is. I think he's still developing a little bit in that way, but I think he can become a very good run blocker. And towards the end of the year, he was starting to fill into that role quite nicely. And so hopefully we'll see that development continue, and we'll see him be that kind of that blocking tight end that can rotate as the second or third guy. And then, yeah, we've got a bunch of guys that I guess at this point are kind of unknowns, but that there's a lot of talent there, and certainly a lot of athleticism with the guys you mentioned, and Samus Reyes coming back for another year. And, it'll be interesting in preseason to see kind of how frequently they all play and who fits in where. And because at this point we know the top three, who's the next few guys, and it'll be interesting to see in preseason how that plays out, and whether, as you say, Hodges, maybe he could crack that top three, or whether they might have to try to keep a fourth tight end if they like him, because the tight end sets can bring a lot to Scott Turner's offense. In Carolina, he had quite a few tight ends, and being able to work out of 13 personnel with one running back, 3 tight ends, and 1 receiver, you can kind of bunch up a formation and make it look like a run, and then Turner doing his thing of motioning and shifting guys all around. You can move to an empty set and create matchups, and that's something that Wentz does well. That's something that Turner does well. So if you have the tight ends to do that should help. And last year they didn't have the tight ends to do that, and this year hopefully they should.
If they keep 4, would you care to take an early guess at who the 4th man is?
My guess would be Hodgins, but I haven't had a good look at any of those guys. I don't think it would be Reyes. I'm guessing he's still probably too new to the game.
Yeah.
But maybe he'll surprise me in preseason. But my guess right now would be Hodges. I think the kind of athletic upside is very similar, but obviously Hodgins has played the game a lot more, so you would expect him to be better.
It would mean that every tight end on the roster is at least 6'5", all the way to 6'8", I think, for Hodges. So a basketball team in the tight end room, which is how that thing is moving anyway. So that makes sense. Right or wrong, Chase Roullier is the best offensive lineman we have.
If he plays the way he did before his injury last year, yes. He was right up there, in my eyes, playing at a very similar level to what Brandon Sheriff was playing. So for me, he was playing at a very high level before he got injured, and he was definitely proving worth the contract that he got last year. So if he can return back to that, and obviously that's still an if because he's coming off the injury, and you never quite know how a guy's going to come back from injury. Obviously, you're hopeful that he'll get back to 100%, and if he does, I think he is probably stands out as the best lineman that they have. Now, potentially Sam Cosmi, because of his athletic ability at tackle, he has the potential to develop into their best lineman, but I don't think he's there yet. We'll see how he develops this year. If he takes kind of the same kind of jump he took from the start of last year to the end of last year, if he can take that jump again this year, then he will be in a good spot. But I think going into this year, I think Roullier is their best guy right now.
Where were you when Cosmi got drafted? Like, you on him, and like, I mean, I know that they are super high on him, and didn't think that he would make it that far. And that's why they took him there, knowing there was no way they thought he'd make it to the next round. I know they're high on him. Were you, and are you still?
I wasn't that high on him. I thought that was probably the right spot for him, because obviously the athletic ability is off the charts and it's outstanding. And if you can harness that athletic ability, you can have a all-pro talent there. It's about getting that technique right. And when I watched him out of college, I could see quite a lot of the technical flaws that were in his game. And he would bend from the waist quite a lot. And that is a big issue for offensive linemen. That's easy for defenders to beat. And we saw that in week 1 with Joey Bosa. And, the start of the year, he had a rough start of the year in terms of pass protection. In run blocking, he did a lot better than I thought he would do. I didn't see the nasty streak that he had in college. I saw him he would move guys and he would do his job in the run game, but he didn't have that kind of, I'm going to finish every block and play through the whistle. But he had that a lot more in kind of the early weeks of the season. So I was encouraged by that. And by the end of the year, I thought he had improved his technique a lot. You could see him be a lot more patient, lunging at linemen less, not bending at the waist, bending more at the knees, and being in a much more set position. He still has some hand things to work out, but and consistency on his technique to work with. But I think he's on the right path. And as I say, the way he improved from week 1 to week 17 or week 18, whatever it is now, last year, was pretty dramatic, especially given that he was injured quite a lot of that. So hopefully we'll see the similar jump, and they'll be tapping into that potential that he does have.
Mark, 2 years in a row now, they've had the opportunity in the first round to draft a left tackle. They punted on that for Charles Leno. I'm not suggesting that that was a mistake. I'm just curious what you thought about that. Charles Leno is good, but oftentimes, particularly last year, when you're in that 15-16 range, teams without a premier left tackle like to go that route. They've been loyal to Leno, gave him the contract. Do you like that move, or are you surprised they didn't try to upgrade there?
No, I liked that move. I think Leno played pretty solidly, and he formed a really good partnership with Eric Flowers, and that's why it kind of surprised me when they extended Leno that they let Flowers go, because that was a pretty solid partnership. Now, obviously, they brought in Norwell, who knows the system and is a veteran, and vets tend to be able to gel a lot quicker. They've been around and seen a lot of different offenses and different players and stuff. So I don't think they'll have any issues there, really. But I don't think Leno's ever going to be considered a top 5 or a top 10 tackle, but I think he's a left tackle. If you can produce a relatively consistent performance, that you know what you're going to get, you know what his weaknesses are, you know what he might struggle with. You can game plan for that. You can, if it's a particularly effective pass rusher against him one week, if it's a guy that maybe beats him for speed a little bit too much, you can, put a tight end on that side and chip, or have the running back chip before he releases, and you can help him that way, or you can slide the line towards him, and then he can overset to the outside to cut off that speed rush, knowing that he has the left guard helping him as well. So you can do things, game plan around weaknesses when you know a guy is consistent, and when you can rely on the guy to do what he does well every week. And I think that's what they like about Leno, is that they know that he's not the top 5 tackle in the league, but they know that they will consistently get kind of B plus performance out of him, and that they can, when they get a matchup that's not good for him, they know they can help him out.
It's a funny thing about offensive linemen, because it really is more about how that unit gels than, maybe the only group in the game that is so dependent on all the other members of that unit, right? Defensive line maybe, but again, they've got kind of different things they do. The way they work in unison on that offensive line is so important. And to your point, it's kind of why I was surprised they let Eric Flowers go. Not that I think there's some big gap in talent between Norwell and Flowers, but they weren't playing Flowers a ton. He had a productive season. This will be one of those moves, right, that we'll look back on in a year and say, boy, they swung for it and missed, or we'll say, yeah, very good. Didn't really mess anything up, because I think it would be hard to upgrade. I don't know how much of an upgrade it is, I guess is what I'm getting to. Is it just a lateral move, or will we find out that they upgraded?
Yeah, I think it's overall kind of a lateral move, and probably just slightly cheaper to save a little bit of money. But I think Norwell is probably a little bit better of a pass protector than Eric Flowers was, and Flowers probably had a little bit more strength and knock off the ball kind of as a run blocker than Norwell does at this point. So I think that you're kind of trading off the upside of pass protection versus run blocking, but they're still relatively similar level players at this point in their career. So I don't think it's a upgrade. I don't think it's a downgrade. I think it's a rather lateral move that you trade off a little bit better pass protection for a little bit worse run blocking, and the key is that you've got to protect Carson Wentz now that you made the move for Carson Wentz. So perhaps they saw that upside, that little bit more upside in pass protection, as more important this year, because they've made the move for Wentz rather than last year, where they knew they were going to have to run the ball a lot more to help the offense sustain itself with Heineke behind center. So I think it's kind of a lateral move with slight advantages and disadvantages.
Do you think they plan on passing the ball a lot more this year with the upgraded quarterback, or you think it'll be about the same? They're just hoping that the plays will be more explosive.
I think we'll probably see them try to pass the ball more. And it could be a case of that a lot of the time they called like RPOs that can be both runs and passes, and the defense took away some of the passing options and forced the run, and sometimes they tried to take away the run option, and the quarterback would make the wrong read or things like that, where it ended up them running the ball a little bit more. But I think philosophically, Scott Turner is kind of one of the younger, more modern coaches in that they believe in passing the ball to get a lead and then running the ball to keep the lead.
A lot of first down passes.
So I think we'll probably see an increase in passing. And again, as I say, that could become from just running RPOs and Wentz deciding to throw the ball more. So we'll see exactly how that goes down, but I would anticipate them throwing the ball a little bit more.
When I watched the tape back last year, I saw a lot of guys open and just the ball not going either in time or to the right place. I am a Scott Turner fan. Are you?
Yeah, I don't think he's one of the top 5 coordinators in the league necessarily, but I think those guys all seem to be from that Shanahan tree right now. And this is a slightly different style of offense. I've kind of just spent the week writing about what his offense is like and how philosophically what he does is go with a kind of handful of concepts that he really likes, rather than and runs them out of a bunch of different looks that the defense can't key into anything in particular. And so he'll run dagger 4 or 5 times a game. He'll run sail 4 or 5 times again. He'll run 4 verticals all the time. He'll run mesh as his kind of go-to thing in short yardage situations. But he'll dress it up by switching the formation, switching the personnel groups, switching the different motions and shifts, and giving the defense so many different looks that they don't know what's coming. And then in turn, it makes it complicated for the defense, but simple for the offense. And the quarterback has the same read every time. It's just a different receiver running the route. So that's the kind of style that he likes to use. And I think that should suit what they have in this personnel group now. Whereas they didn't quite have the depth of talent with the kind of skill positions last year to really excel in that regard. And this year now they've got all the different pieces, and hopefully everyone stays healthy, because then you can see just how good Scott Turner can be with all the different pieces at his disposal.
They call that a segue. We'll wrap with wide receiver. But before we do that, I do one last thing on the offensive line. It feels like he's missed the first couple of days, but it feels like it's Trey Turner's job at right guard, even though I like Schweitzer. I wonder, just for the sake of roster building, if they'll start Trey Turner knowing that Schweitzer can play both center and guard. I'm not sure that's the way I'd do it. I think I'd still start him at right guard because I think he's better. And then if Rouillet goes down, let's say, then you could put Trey Turner in at guard and move him back to center. Chase Rouillet was out there today, which makes me feel like he ought to be a go for week 1. I'm curious with your thoughts on the Schweitzer dilemma, if you will.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think Schweitzer earned the right to start last year, and I think he played really well. Certainly as a run blocker, he was fantastic, regardless of whether he was playing left guard, right guard, center. He was generating so much movement in the run game, which is essential for the kind of zone runs that they ran most of last year. So I think if they're sticking to that system, which I anticipate they will, I think he earned the right to kind of be first in line to take Brandon Sheriff's spot at right guard. Now, whether, obviously, as you say, Chase Rouillet injury plays into it, and Schweitzer would be their primary center backup, I would think, because, as you say, he can play both spots. And what we heard today was that Rouillet participated in individual drills, but when it came to team drills, Schweitzer came back in at center and Rouillet stood on the sidelines. So I think we'll see in the coming days, once Rouillet is kind of back up to 100% and ready to participate in team drills, whether Schweitzer takes over at guard. I think that's the way I would do it, because there's not, the only question is how it affects Cosme at right tackle, because last year,
sure. Okay.
when Cosme was playing right tackle, they had Sheriff at right guard, who was obviously a very, very good right guard. But Sheriff was they did a lot of things schematically that helped Cosme when he was struggling, particularly early in the season. And it was still happening late in the year, but less frequently, where they would slide the line towards Cosme, and Sheriff would almost always pass his guy off inside rather than trying to block his guy. And that would allow Sheriff to kind of slide across and help Cosme if ever he was having trouble. So whether they think Turner might be better at that than Schweitzer, as Turner's a little bit better of a pass protector, that might be something that plays into the mix. But you would hope that going into year 2, Cosme would be a little bit better and more consistent with his technique, and wouldn't need that help quite so often. And then you could just rely on picking the best overall player for right guard rather than the guy that can help the right tackle most.
Do you know who's taking those snaps at right guard right now? I don't know why I just thought of this. That Turner hasn't played the first couple of practices, and Schweitzer's been at center. So I'm not sure who's taking snaps.
No, I'm
Charles, maybe?
Yeah, it might be Charles.
I
would imagine he's probably high up in that rotation. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure who's taking those snaps. If it's not Turner and obviously Schweitzer's occupied at center, I would guess Charles probably.
Okay, let's wrap with wide receiver. I think we're set at the top 3, 4, I guess. It's McLaurin, Samuel, who we got? Jahan Dotson, and
De'Ami Brown.
If I told you that Terry McLaurin led the group in receptions, who comes in second?
It would be a mix of either Samuel or Dotson, depending on Samuel's health. I would guess right now, I'll guess Dotson. But if Samuel's able to stay healthy for a whole year, he provides maybe a little bit more explosion after the catch, and that might be something that they want to lean on a little bit more at times. I would guess it would be one of those two. I think it would be. I'm going to lean Dotson based on the ability to stay healthy right now.
I get the feeling that people think that it's going to be Terry on one side and Dotson on the other side, and Samuel's moving all over the place. Now, while I'll agree that I think Samuels will be moving a lot, I think he's going to line up outside a whole lot more than people think with Dotson in the slot. I'm curious what you think about it.
Yeah, I think the beauty of those two receivers is they're both able to play inside and outside. And that plays into a lot of what Scott Turner likes to do because, as I say, you can run the same concept 2 plays in a row and you just put Dotson in the slot on one play and Samuel in the slot the next time. And it's a different look for the defense, but it's the same concept, same read, same throw for the quarterback. So I think we'll see those guys flipping and flopping quite a lot. And it sounds like in training camp, we have seen both Samuel and Dotson in the slot and outside at times. So I don't know right now exactly who's going to be which one. My guess would be that Samuel would be the Z receiver, which is the outside guy, and Dotson would be the slot. But as I say, they're so flexible that they can both flip outside if they need to. And even McLaurin could go into the slot at times if they need to as well. So I think the beauty of the offense is that all 3 of those guys will be moved around a ton, and we won't just see a lot of base I-set formations with 2 receivers outside. They're going to be moving around all over the place. So it's going to be fun to watch, I think.
And we should see an uptick in like bubble screens and tunnel screens to receivers. Not a ton of that last year. Feels like we'll see a lot more of that this year, right? I mean, letting guys that are explosive be explosive. That's kind of what you want to do, right?
Yeah, and it was kind of an odd thing because you would think you would see a lot more screens with the athletic offensive line that they have. The fact that the offensive line were able to get so much movement in the run game with the zone scheme, typically that trend translates to offensive linemen that are able to get out in front of screens and block screens well. So you would think that with Samuel back and Jahan Dotson, obviously Terry McLaurin, you have a group of guys there that are threats on bubble screens and what have you. And you have offensive linemen and hopefully now some more tight ends that can block as well. And you have a group of guys that the screen game should improve, however they want to run it, whether it's bubble screens or swing screens and different disguised types of screens. I think we should see a lot more of that. Yeah.
The first four are set, assuming they have 6 on the roster. Who are the last 2? Antonio Gandy-Golden moved to tight end and then retired. Still got Cam Sims, still got Kelvin Harmon. I'm trying to think at the bottom of that roster. It feels like those are the next 2 guys in.
For me, it would be Cam Sims to give them a bit of more height and physicality, and then I think I would go Dax Milne as a guy that's kind of a nice route runner that can kind of replace what they got from Adam Humphries last year. And to an extent, they don't necessarily need to do that because Jahan Dotson can play in the slot, and as we just talked about, Curtis Samuel can play in there and what have you. So they don't necessarily need what Adam Humphries brought, but I think Dax Milne can offer that and a little bit more. So I think they like what he sort of showed as talent last year, and then hope that he can develop. And if he's the kind of 6th guy and maybe as a punt returner or something like that, then I think that would be the way he makes the roster.
Yep, no, I totally agree with you. I had Dax Milne's one of those guys I completely forgot about, but a draft pick of theirs, they're not getting rid of their own draft picks. So I think you're definitely right there. And would not be surprised if he was the punt returner. It sounds like it'll be between him and Dotson. And while Dotson probably gives them a little bit more explosion, I also was surprised they didn't give Milne more of the Humphrey snaps last year, because I think he's a better player. Frankly, I was surprised Humphrey made the team last year, even though he played fairly well. Let's wrap with this, Mark. This has been a preview of the offense all week long. What is it that Carson needs to do? Does it matter what he does from a number wise? Is it more about just taking care of the ball? I mean, I think that for the first time in a long time, plan on offense is, I think they realize that the modern NFL is a race to 40. Right? I mean, we're not winning football games 17-14 anymore. If you do, it's going to be a long, stressful season. That's not what they brought Carson Wentz in for. Where does he need to get to for this team to get to where they want to get to, which is the playoffs?
Yeah, I think he needs to be more consistent in his decision making, and hopefully with the weapons that he has this year, he will be a little bit less reliant on playing hero ball, where he feels like he has to run around and make the play himself. Because we saw that a lot last year, and with the Colts, in that he only really had Pittman that was consistently getting open for him. And so when Pittman was taken away, he would end up having, and plus the offensive line with the Colts struggled with pass protection as well.
People don't realize that offensive line was not good in Indianapolis last year.
No, it was a very, very good run blocking offensive line, and that's why they leaned on that run game. But they struggled to pass protect, and so he was often scrambling around. And when he goes into scramble mode, he can start. A lot of quarterbacks realize now that when you start scrambling and going off scripts, that can create a lot of explosive plays. So you start hurling the ball down the field. And it's true, that can create a lot of explosive plays. But if you're just recklessly hurling the ball down the field, that can lead to a lot of turnovers as well. And that can be a big problem for him. So hopefully he can stay on script a little bit more, and doesn't rely on hero ball. And hopefully with the weapons that he has and Turner's scheme, we'll see the guys getting open and him getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and finding his guys. And then the other thing I would like to see is mechanics be a little bit more clean, a little bit more consistently clean. He does a really nice job of getting the ball out pretty quickly, but he doesn't always get himself aligned properly. He can have some issues with his front shoulder flying open, and he can miss throws like high and behind. It's kind of like we saw with Taylor Heineke last year. And we've seen in training camp videos so far that, when he misses, it's quite often high. So you'd like to see his mechanics clean up a little bit, and be a little bit more consistent. And if he can do that and stop playing the hero ball stuff and just play within the structure of the offense should give him enough chances to go deep and create the explosive plays without him having to, scramble around and play hero ball. So if he can do that, I think he can be successful. And the turnovers will come, but hopefully the explosive plays will, outdo the turnovers and help them make the playoffs.
Are the mechanics at this point something that coaches believe they can fix? I mean, I know coaches believe they can fix anything, but realistically, I mean, I know that you're a historian of the game. Is that one of the things? There are a couple of things I know coaches feel like, yes, we can work and fix. Are the mechanics one this late into the game, as you will?
Yeah, the mechanics can always improve, and I mean, you see Tom Brady now. He's mechanically a much more clean quarterback than he was 10 years ago when he was probably still older than Carson Wentz is now. So, quarterback mechanics can always improve, and it takes a lot of repetitions with the right coaching and getting the muscle memory down, and kind of erasing the previous muscle memory where you're doing things. And as Wentz matures and becomes a little bit less mobile, just kind of naturally from getting older, his attention might go to more refining those mechanics than, relying on the fact that he's got a big arm and he doesn't need to be mechanically sound and he can, scramble around and create things himself. Whereas when he gets older, he'll not be able to do that quite so frequently. So he needs to refine those mechanics and be a little bit more consistent from the pocket. And hopefully we'll be seeing the kind of starting process of that this off season, going into this season. But I guess we'll see what happens come week 1.
Mark, I know you said that this last week you've been working on Turner's offense. What do you got coming up next, and let all the folks know where they can find your work at?
Yep. So on Twitter at Mark Bullock NFL, I've got my Substack, which is markbullock.substack.com. I'm doing a bunch of different stuff at the moment. I just did a week's worth of articles on Scott Turner's offense.
Mark, tell the folks at home a little bit about Substack, just in case they don't know what that is.
Yeah, so Substack is basically a website online where you can subscribe to newsletters that people do. You can use it as a newsletter thing where every article that I write will get emailed to your inbox, and you'll wake up in the morning and you'll see the article and be able to read it there. You can also just use it as a kind of a normal site like The Athletic or The Washington Post or anything like that, where you go on the site, you click on the article, you read it, and then there's a comment section that you can give your feedback and what have you. So, it's a nice way of being able to, support my work and subscribing to that, and you get the articles emailed to you, and then you can either read them there or on the site and reply back to me, and you can request certain things in a game week. You might be wondering what happened on a certain play, and you can tweet me or email me or respond in a comment on the site, and I'll do my best to either write about it or tweet about it or what have you. So that's kind of what I've got going on there. And next week, I'm at the moment in my head, I've got planned something on Terry McLaurin to kind of celebrate that he got his contract, something on Cam Curl to kind of, I'm expecting big things from him this year. So I kind of want to look at Cam Curl, and I think this time next year he'll be the one that is getting the kind of big contract extension. So that's my plan for next week so far.
Very good. I get that newsletter emailed to me every time, and I love it. So, Mark, thank you so much. Always appreciate you coming on. Always learn something new, and we'll be seeing you soon. Hopefully, I think we're going to work on something a little bit more regular during the regular season, and that I'm looking forward to that. So, always great talking to you, buddy, and we'll see you next time.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.